Today, I'd like to introduce you a paper from the magazine Mutilmodal Transportation. It's called An Updated Literature Review of CO2e Calculation in Road Freight Transportation, whose author is Payam Dehdari. I hope you can learn something. In recent decades, increasing emphasis is being placed on sustainable freight transport. The aim of this study is to discern how detailed the calculation of CO2e emissions in road transport is. Fourth is, the study conducted a sample review with 53 scientific sources and 121 annual reports. Only 14 out of the 53 scientific sources incorporated emissions that occur as a byproduct of energy supply. Not more than 14 of the 121 companies included emissions from transportation activities of both the upstream and downstream processes. Therefore, the study highlights the necessity for new and validated models to support decision-making processes that sustainably reduce CO2e emissions. Many different methods exist to define SB for emissions. For example, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol with its 3 scopes is suitable for all industries, including logistics and transportation companies. However, the GHG Protocol is not sufficiently specific to be applied in logistics. Therefore, the Network for Transport Measures has created a GHG Protocol compliant methodology to assess emissions from road freight transportation. The NTM defines 5 SB for transportation-related CO2e emissions. SB1 comprises direct emissions from actual transport operation. SB2 includes well-to-tank emissions DIN N16 to 58. SB3 includes emissions caused by service and maintenance of the vehicle, as well as operation and maintenance of the traffic and transport infrastructure. SB4 is broader in scope and encompasses construction and scrapping of the vehicle, as well as construction and dismantling of the traffic, transport, service, and maintenance infrastructure. SB5 includes emissions due to administrative functions, personnel, and others. Not all SB are required for every type of decision. SB1 ought to be considered for operational decisions such as route planning. SB2 needs to be considered when deciding on the fuel types to be purchased. SB3 plays a part in tactical decisions, such as consolidating within logistics hubs, or intermodal transport using transshipment points. SB4 and SB5 are factored in for strategic decisions, such as supply chain network design or road freight infrastructure projects. As the focus of this literature review is on the transportation of a single shipment between 2 locations by truck, the factors of length of landing and takeoff drive cycle, intermodal transfer, and trade line-specific ships are irrelevant. This leaves 12 influencing factors for consideration. The literature sources can be reviewed in full using the SB of the NTM with details on the influencing factors of eco-transit within SB1. As for additional evaluation of emissions within SB2, the calculation of well-to-tank emissions is an integral part of 7 out of 10 guidelines and tools. Only 4 of the 37 scientific papers consider well-to-tank emissions, and all 4 sources use different methodologies and parameters to determine well-to-tank emissions, and additional evaluations of emissions within SB3, in contrast to emissions within SB2. Emissions within SB3 are predominantly not considered in the guidelines and tools, except in the NTM, the GLEC and SBT. I even recommend that emissions from the transportation infrastructure be evaluated in terms of logistics locations. The GLEC framework specifically considers emissions from fuel and electricity used to store or transport goods within the facility. It also recommends including direct losses from refrigerants. 10 out of 37 scientific papers consider CO2 emissions within SB3 freighttransportation is the only source that considers emissions from the operation and maintenance of traffic infrastructure, which identified the main factors influencing emissions from a road and determined the primary energy required for maintenance and operation. Then additional evaluation of emissions within SB4 and SB5. This table illustrates an overview of the SB as mentioned in the respective sources. The scientific papers are listed according to the number of SB influencing factors they use. Figure depicts the frequency with which individual influencing factors are used in the 37 scientific articles. Based on the SB system and the influence factors included, we have analyzed guidelines, tools, scientific papers, and annual reports of firms. Most guidelines consider SB1. Only 14 out of the 53 scientific sources incorporated emissions that occur as a byproduct of energy supply, and some highlight the importance of SB3 to SB5, but do not provide any specific method to calculate them. All influencing factors in SB1 and SB2 can be calculated with the PTV tool. Scientists have applied SB1 incompletely and SB2 to SB5 poorly. Only a few companies have taken the CO2e emissions of road freight transport into account in their reports. Those that did so did not indicate which SB were considered simultaneously. We also find that within SB1, depending on the selection of the influencing factors taken into account, the result of the calculated CO2e emissions can vary by more than 50%. Or, when SB2 to SB5 are also considered, by more than 29%. Under no circumstances can this deviation be considered an acceptable basis for decision-making aimed at reducing CO2e emissions. We therefore conclude that there is an urgent need for the scientific community to provide models that support decision-making on operational, tactical, or strategic levels with the corresponding SB1 to SB5 to reduce CO2e emissions in a sustainable manner. These models must be validated, and prediction errors must be calculated.